Today we talk about what things you can and can't do after an IVF embryo transfer, and is there any actual truth to those things? I'm Dr. Mark Amols, and this is Taco About Fertility Tuesday. If you have ever been through an embryo transfer, the one thing you know is that you are scared to death afterwards that you're going to mess something up. When I say mess something up, I mean prevent you from getting pregnant. If it doesn't work, you're going to go back and look at everything you did. Did I lift something? Did I do something wrong? Did I eat something wrong? And it doesn't help that the clinics give you a list of things that they tell you not to do. Matter of fact, even at our clinic, we do have a list of things that we recommend not doing. The question is there actually science behind it? And does that science prove that those things shouldn't be done? Or are we telling you to do it for different reasons? Today's podcast, we're going to address those questions and give you the evidence behind each suggestion and whether we're telling you to do it for a reason to prevent a miscarriage or prevent implantation, or are we telling you it to help prevent anxiety? Please keep in mind that this is not all encompassing. There are clinics out there that tell people not to do things such as flying within 24 hours of the transfer. We do not say that. However, I'm going to address the things I've heard from other patients, and I may not talk about something you specifically were told, but please feel free to reach out to us and let us know, and I can try to address it on another episode. Well, here we go. So let's start with the biggest question of all. Can you have intercourse? And I can almost tell you every single clinic that you work with is going to say no intercourse after the transfer until you see a heartbeat. And the fear is that you'll cause harm. Now, in reality, there's absolutely no reason you can't have intercourse from the standpoint that it's not going to cause implantation to not occur or cause a miscarriage. Even the American Society of Reproductive Medicine indicates that sexual activity does not increase the risk of miscarriage or affect implantation in a normal pregnancy. But why do we tell everyone to do it? Do we just hate people and want them to not have intercourse? It's because this recommendation is not based off of solid evidence, but it's based off of a precaution. And that precaution is that it is very scary to get bleeding, especially around the time of implantation or in the early pregnancy. And what happens is when you have relations, the cervix on the uterus becomes very friable. That's just kind of a fancy word of saying it can easily bleed. And that occurs because of all the hormones that are increasing. It causes the cells that are inside of the cervix to come onto the outside of the cervix. And that eversion makes those cells very friable and easily can bleed. And so when you're having relations, you can hit those cells and cause bleeding. Now, there's no harm to the pregnancy, but the problem is it will scare you. And I've had many phone calls in the middle of the night worrying about bleeding after having relations. And I have to, make sure they understand that there's no harm, but it's still very scary. Sometimes they can't get a hold of us because we're not in an emergency room, and then they go to the ER and have a horrible experience. But the point is, can you have relations? Yes. Now, would I recommend you wait? I would. But why the heartbeat? Why is that so arbitrary? Well, it's not. It's because that's the point where you can actually see the baby. See, if you have bleeding at, let's say, 5 weeks in one day, I can check an HCG level. But until I check the next HCG level a day or two later, I can't tell you things are okay. So there's no way for me to confirm you that the bleeding is not causing harm. But if I see a heartbeat and you have bleeding, then you can come on in, I can do an ultrasound and show you the heartbeat is there. And then even okay, things are fine. The baby's doing well. That is the reason we recommend to the heartbeat, because then if you ever have concern, we can look you in the eye and say, look, everything's okay. There's that beautiful heartbeat. The next category is basically going to be physical activity, specifically exercise and lifting. Now, there is nothing wrong exercising post-transfer, just like there's nothing wrong lifting things post-transfer. But what we do worry about is strenuous activity that might cause physical strain on you. Even the American Society of Reproductive Medicine says there is no strong evidence suggesting that lifting moderate weights impacts implantation or pregnancy success. Now, like I've talked in other podcasts, that doesn't mean that if you normally don't exercise, that you should all of a sudden start exercising the week of the transfer. I say wait until the pregnancy is established and then slowly introduce the exercise. But the strain part is the most important. You don't want strenuous exercise that causes strain. The reason that we have weight limits is because we don't want people to have strain. Now, that doesn't mean you can't pick up your toddler. If you couldn't pick up your toddler, then that means no one would ever have a second kid, because as soon as they left their kid, they would lose the pregnancy or not implant. What it is saying is that you don't want to all of a sudden start going and lifting 50 pounds every day just for fun. That's where the weight limit comes from. It's basically to make sure if you're working, we can give you a note so you can tell your doctor to provide some type of limitations, so that way your doctor can write this for your employer, and then that way you don't have to have this heavy lifting in this early portion of pregnancy. One area I get concerned about is vibrations. And I want to be clear that there is no scientific basis for this, but I'll explain to you why I get concerned about vibrations. And what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that you can't be around things that vibrate. There are large vibrations like driving in a car, flying in a plane. But I'm talking about serious repetitive vibrations, such as holding a lawnmower, or if you're using those weight loss machines that like vibrate you a whole bunch, even vacuuming. Now the question is why? Why am I worried about that? I mean, statistically speaking, it's probably fine, because if using a vacuum or mowing your lawn prevented you from getting pregnant, then there'd be a lot fewer pregnancies in the world. But the reason why is because it's actually mechanical, meaning the waves of energy are going to go through your body. And if you've ever mowed your lawn for a long period of time, or even used a vacuum for a long period of time, even after you're done doing the activity, you can still feel the vibrations in your body because it's just been penetrating through it the whole time, all those vibrations. My concern is that implantation and those vibrations might have an effect. Now, again, this is just my own fear. I have no evidence of this. And when my wife went through this, I told her not to do it either. And yes, I had to do some vacuuming, but I also want to be intellectually honest that there is no evidence supporting this. But that is one thing I tell my patients to do, again, just to prevent if there is a problem. Because remember, not everything has a study. We don't know if skydiving affects implantation, but no one's going to do that study. Who's going to want to say, hey, you know what, I want to spend a lot of money on IVF. And then what I want to do is I want to compromise it. I want to do that as a study and do it multiple times to figure out if this affects it. No, it's not going to be done. So a lot of things we do are kind of like expert opinion, but it doesn't mean it's scientifically based. And so my recommendation is, yes, you can not have intercourse to reduce stress. You can not lift heavy things to reduce stress. And here, I'd recommend not being around these vibrations that are so significant you feel them through your body. What about traveling? Well, as I was talking about before, the vibrations in the car and the plane are very small. So I'm not so worried about that. But the question is there a concern with just traveling? Can it affect implantation? Is it somehow by being up higher or being closer to the sun can cause problems? And the simple answer is no, it doesn't cause any issues. Now, that being said, it is actually a very common recommendation to avoid flying for 24 hours after an embryo transfer. And again, there is no scientific basis for this. It's being told for as a precaution to minimize the stress and the physical strain after the procedure. Because, I mean, everybody knows going to the airport is quite strainful. And so that's more of the reason why we're telling you to do it versus being scientifically based. What about foods? Can foods cause a problem? Is there a certain diet that might be better to help with implantation? Again, not really. There's no science that says if you eat pineapple core, or if you eat McDonald's French fries right after a transfer, that's going to increase your chances. Just like there's really no evidence that eating certain things, such as foods that are hotter or foods that are colder, are going to affect anything with implantation. And that doesn't mean we don't recommend not doing things like alcohol, keeping mercury levels low when you're eating fish during pregnancy, and we recommend those also around the time of the transfer. But unfortunately, it's not true. McDonald's French fries do not increase implantation, although I'll say that is one I wish was true, because who doesn't love McDonald's French fries? The last area we should talk about is stress. I get this asked all the time. Can stress cause problems? And just like the other things, no. Stress cannot make you not get pregnant. But that doesn't mean we don't want to prevent stress. Again, we talked about how some of these things we're recommending are purely to reduce stress, not because there's science behind it saying that will cause a problem. And the thing is that there is a point where stress can cause problems. Now, specifically in this situation, having stress is not going to make implantation not occur, but having stress can cause you more stress. And that can then lead to anxiety and basically make the experience very poor. Now, how do we know stress doesn't make you not implant? Well, because people get pregnant in very stressful situations, such as people in wars. People in wars still get pregnant. People who are poor and maybe don't have enough food to be able to support their family back in old generations still had kids. Some people didn't even know if they were going to have a house to sleep in the next night, and yet still were able to have kids. Yes, stress is a factor, but stress is not all or none. It's not going to absolutely prevent you from getting pregnant. And so don't worry so much about the stress. Focus more on just what things you can do to help avoid the stress. One of those things you can do is to be informed, which is one of the reasons I do this podcast. And hopefully this podcast helped reduce stress for you, so that way, after your embryo transfer, you can feel comfortable doing these activities, or at least making decisions that you get to make on your own using this information. Hopefully this episode was helpful to someone. Maybe it might be helpful to one of your friends, or maybe just in the future, you might come across someone and you go, hey, I saw that this podcast one time I listened to and they talked about this. Either way, if you love us, please give us a 5-star review on your favorite medium. And if you can, tell a friend about our podcast so we can spread the word. But most important, keep coming back. I look forward to talking to you again next week on Talk About Fertility Tuesday.